So hello everybody, welcome to the CFO Connect Summit and the session about FP&A for startups. This event is hosted by CFO Connect, which you may know is a finance community and a hub of over than 8,000 financial professionals. And it's powered by Spendesk, which is a 7-in-1 spend management solution. So my name is Clémentine Svartz. I'm the head of finance at Spendesk. I've been at Spendesk for a bit more than 3 years now. So before introducing the speaker today, I will very briefly introduce what we're going to cover today. So it will all be about FP&A, so standing for Financial Planning and Analysis, and how the FP&A function and teams can actually help businesses to plan for the future. And especially any company actually needs to do that. It's important for all of them, but even more for startup, and especially in the recent market condition with uncertainty, with volatility. So today our expert will cover this topic and detail how they are able to project future in their own companies. So let's have them introduce themselves. So we'll have today Chloé, Paul, and Rienzo. So thank you guys for being here today, and I will let you start with your introduction. So maybe Chloé, you can start today.
So hi everyone, thrilled to be here today. I'm currently the head of finance at Pigment, and I joined the company in January this year. And prior to that, I was head of finance at Conto. And prior to that, I was head of finance of a blockchain startup called Stratum.
Okay, thanks, Chloé. Paul, you want to be next?
Of course, thank you. Paul Mondollot. I joined Aircall 3 years ago, currently the VP of FP&A. And prior to this, I had a few years of experience in controlling in the automotive industry. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Paul.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rienzo. I'm head of pricing, planning, and controlling at Solaris. I started my career in management consulting, working for McKinsey and ZDB. ZDB is a consultancy that's focused on financial services. Afterwards, I worked in the traditional finance space at Moody's Investor Service, or the credit rating agency. And then I got the opportunity to join FinLeap, which is now the leading fintech ecosystem in Europe. And one of the companies that they founded was Solarisbank.
Okay, so thank you all of three for being here today again. So if that's fine with you, let's start and get into detail. But maybe we can start with the whole team structure and organization that you have within your team, within your FP&A team, in terms maybe of size, of structuring, and history. Paul, if you want to go ahead with that one.
Yeah, of course. So structure of FP&A team. And before I start about Aircall, maybe I wanted to talk about startups. Like, how do you want to structure your FP&A? Maybe where you're scaling, you're just starting. And at least in my opinion, I think that it's key to invest kind of early on into FP&A, even as a startup. Say after Series A or B, depending on your size. In my opinion, very early on, you need maybe 1 or 2 people. And why is that? Even before having anyone in the accounting team or anyone else in finance. Because FP&A, first off, I think the scope at the very beginning, when you're scaling, will be very broad. It may include some part of the data, some part of the RevOps. Sometimes even you'll have some legal aspect to it, depending on how you're structured. It's going to be a very transversal job, just because the company is not well structured. And also, what's very important is that, again, when you're starting, you want to be careful to be able to have enough resources to do all the run of the FP&A, all the core, of the FP&A, which is reporting, budgeting, forecasting, etc. But also invest into the future. So start building. into tools, processes, people. And the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be. I'm saying all this because at Aircall currently, we're 3 people plus me, so 4 people. And I think that it's a bit late compared to the scale of the company. And we see that in terms of tools and processes, we're basically not able to support the whole organization, and we have to make choices. So as a startup, if you're scaling, I think you should be careful to not be in this situation and definitely have more resources.
Thanks, Paul. So based on what you just said, so are you still hiring within your team? If you're saying that with four of you guys, it's not enough?
Yeah, we'll be hiring. So I took the job a couple of weeks ago. I used to work in the corporate finance at Aircall prior to this. So, but if some people are listening, be on the lookout for a few positions in the future.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you, Paul. Rienzo, maybe you can go ahead with the structure at Solaris.
Yeah, happy to. So we only established planning and controlling our Fp&A at Solaris at the beginning of 2020. So Solarisbank officially received the license in March 2016. So it's been a few years in. So I definitely can second what Paul was mentioning before in regards to the timing of when such Fp&A function or first people to the team should be established. And yeah, pretty much since the start, we used to run Fp&A essentially with 2.5 people. The half person basically being me, as I am responsible for pricing and used to be also responsible for commercial analytics. And and within the team, we cover pretty much all the planning related elements, financial reporting, also including analysis of product and now also country performance. We control for all the cost positions across the organization, and also we have to support the fundraising rounds and provide a forward-looking perspective. So this is really a comprehensive or rather extensive area of responsibility. And yeah, at the same time, since we are a fully licensed bank, we also need to make sure that we are fully compliant with all the requirements from audit and the regulator. Now we are a team of 4 people, plus myself, of which 2 were onboarded in the last few months. But it just gets challenging as the workload and the requirements keep increasing. Yeah, so the organization is growing. We're expanding internationally. We are having a more diverse customer base. So making sure that we keep track and measure performance adequately remains a challenge. And that's also the reason why we are looking to automate the processes. We consider establishing a planning tool that will replace our more Excel-based work. But I think that's something. How you have to imagine it, you have a machine that keeps running, an airplane that keeps flying, and at the same time, you need to do a lot of fundamental work and kind of make sure the driving towards automation while you still need to deliver. And maybe just as a benchmark from the more traditional banking industry, I heard that a team of 4 controllers, dedicated accountants, and a team lead were dedicated to one product alone. Obviously, at Solaris, we have a much broader product portfolio, but just to give you that kind of benchmark. But obviously, in the startup space, that when resources are around, you're trying to keep a lean team setup. Overall, it can be quite challenging.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rienzo. Maybe, and Paul, I'm not sure you mentioned that, but maybe you can give us the size of your whole organization, meaning at Aircall and Solaris, so that we can also, compare the size of the finance team and the Fp&A team.
Sure. And by the way, there's someone breathing. I'm not sure who that is. Hopefully not me. But we had some comments about this. So the size of Aircall, we're 800 people. And reached 100 million AR this year. So obviously, most people are in go-to-market or tech. We have, I think, around 20 people in finance, most of whom are in accounting. And then, as I said, maybe 4 people in Fp&A.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And on your side, Rienzo?
On Solaris side, we have more than 850 people working, and that also includes the ones, as we in December acquired Qantas, a competitor in the UK, and that obviously creates more challenges as we grow and also have to consolidate.
Thanks a lot. And Chloe, same question for you about the structuring of the team, the size of Pigment, and how you are well organized.
Yes, so as Paul and Rienzo mentioned, it's really depending on the size and the maturity of the company. And at Pigment, we're way younger than Aircall and Solaris. The company is 2 years old. I joined in January when there was no finance team. And right now, the finance team is 3 people, including myself. I have a FP&A manager with me, so I would say we're 1.5 people in the FP&A team. And it really depends, on how you see the scope. When you start with a blank page, which was our case, the scope is way broader than pure FP&A. It can include, RevOps, pricing, which was our case. But in my view, it's very important to have your first finance manager as an FP&A professional. The person will help you, build your business plan, will help you monitor your performance versus the budget, will produce your P&L, your cash flow statements on a monthly basis. And as Paul said, I think it's super hard to catch up once you have a few years of legacy. And I would not recommend, to postpone this topic to a later stage. There's a lot of challenges early on when it comes to, financial communication, managing performance, support to decision making as well. That requires, attention and coverage. I would say that for our size, 1.5 people is enough right now. We've been lucky because we at Pigment provide a planning software tool which helps a lot in the automation of most of our processes. That saves also some recruiting efforts, but we are recruiting as well. So keep the ears open today. I just recruited like a junior financial and financial planning analyst that will join shortly, but will soon recruit massively, in the finance team to help scale as the company is growing very fast.
Okay, thanks, Chloe. Super clear. So you mentioned something that is perfect for my next question. So we spoke about resources, in terms of people and the size of the team. And what about your tool stack? It's always a really important question for any departments, but obviously also for FP&A. I think all of us started with Excel or spreadsheets, but at some point want to get rid of it. So basically, what are you using internally, not just finance, but what are the main tools the finance team and the FP&A teams are working with? Maybe all of you can answer the question.
Maybe I'll start. I love this question, and I think the audience will love it as well. It's the favorite question in general. We've been lucky at Pigment to automate most of our processes from scratch. So we do use quite a lot of tools for automation. From a CRM perspective, you wouldn't be surprised if I tell you we're using Salesforce. From an HR standpoint, we choose HiBob, which can scale globally. So we use it in France, in the UK, and the US. Of course, we are a superpower user of Pigment for ourselves. We use it for pretty everything, and it has replaced Excel for all our use cases. For cash management, we use AgiCap. For spend management, we use Spendesk, as we needed a tool that could scale in our geographies, so in the UK and the US and France. And last but not least, we're using Equify for investor relations and equity management. And I would say the next two one on the agenda are the ERP and the billing cash collection tool.
Okay, super clear, and nice to see that we are kind of all of us, not all, but using the tools of the other companies as we are also using Pigment at Spendesk. So Paul, maybe you can go ahead.
Sure. So interestingly enough, we don't have a planning tool at the moment at Aircall. So we're still using spreadsheets, which is a bit challenging. However, on the order to cash front, using Salesforce as a CRM, but also the CPQ component, and then NetSuite, the RP does all the billing and all the accounting, of course. And we also have a specific module inside of NetSuite to do the billing part. So those two tools, like Salesforce and NetSuite, for us are kind of the core of the whole finance stack. Then we have tools around it. So Avalara for taxes, mostly in the US. We have all the payment service providers. So Process Out, Stripe, Checkout.com, Go Cardless. And for the spend, actually, we do our P2P instead of NetSuite for the moment, or at least the purchase or the process, which works okay, but not great. We have for expenses, we have Spendesk and Expensify. And last one, Upflow for the dunning. And we do not have a cash management solution for the moment.
Rienzo, same question for you.
Yeah, also within the FP&A team, we are also very Excel heavy at this point in time. So what we're doing is now we're using Salesforce already, and we are also currently in the implementation phase for CPQ and billing from Salesforce. And we are looking to handle revenues and also direct costs as kind of not an out-of-the-box kind of setup. And what we're also using then next to that is Personio as our HR database. We have SAP in place. Wolters Kluwer is used for our regulatory reporting, while we also run our own core banking system, which is also used then to report to the regulator. We have ZDB control in place, which takes care of our financial risk management, and ShareWorks we use for managing the general share pool and ESOP topics. And we're also looking to establish a planning tool in the near future to help us replace some of the Excel-based work.
Cool. So thanks a lot, the three of you. Just quick comment. So we saw that you are asking questions on the chat and comments tab. So thanks a lot for that. We'll deep dive into those questions at the end of the session. So continue to ask your question. We are seeing them and make sure to try to cover most of them. So we'll keep 15 minutes at the end of the session today. So thanks a lot for that. And also quick comment for you, Chloe, when you're not, perfect. I see you've now muted your microphone. So perfect. So now that we have covered the organization and the tool part of your three organization, maybe we can go deeper and understand the overall approach of something that I must assume all of the finance organization are doing at the moment. So basically budget and forecasting. So first question, as finance is completely central and speaking and collaborating with a lot of other team, how are you working on your side? So maybe Paul, you can take that one. How are you collaborating with other team internally? Because we all know that the more stakeholder you have, the more challenging it can be. So what is your organization and the collaboration you manage to put in place at Aircall?
Yeah, sure. So I'll take the angle of more like the budget process itself, who works on it, because obviously everybody in the company is involved in the budget process, right? You need input from most people, but that's kind of obvious. But if we step back, when you start the startup, you have one or two people in FP&A, we talked about this, and typically this team will be responsible for the whole budgeting or forecasting process, right? So data collection for the actuals, basically everything for the historical data, responsible for the modeling of the top line, for example, also the bottom line, cash collection, the cash burn as well, and maybe then spread all the targets to everybody, right? And then once you're a little bit more structured, you'll get additional resources in your data teams or ops, rev ops, however you call them. And this is where you can try depending again on the maturity of the organization, to get those people inside of the process. And I'll take an example. So the RevOps team, I think, over time gets more and more important in making sure that the capacity of all the revenue functions is correctly modeled, and that the headcount that is, forecast for the future matches with the top line. So, matching capacity, headcount, top line by region or country, by channel, etc., can get very complicated. You need to synchronize with a ton of people, and this is where at Aircall, for the moment, now the RevOps team is doing this job, and it's making our life easier, right? We have enough on our plate already. Also, data team is very important, right? Important to be able to get all the data you need. So, the structured data warehouse, the structured Looker, the business intelligence tool that we use with different explorers, where we can basically get all the data we want on whatever type of data. And also, once the budget is finalized, we use Looker to input data at the correct granularity, and then all the stakeholders, they can see their targets for the next year on a recurring basis, and they know where they're standing compared to, to the budget. So yeah, I think the answer for me is depends on your size. Try to get people to work for you as well. You'll have enough on your plate already.
Thanks, Paul. Super clear. And so, having understood a bit of the organization and the collaboration, is there any specific item or advice you can give, maybe Rienzo, on how to prepare for budget in terms maybe of timing, of methodology?
I mean, it's a bit of so for the timing, we typically start the annual budgeting process or the cycle in September and October. We then establish a roadmap from the start and the timeline when what should be delivered. It's always useful to make sure that it's transparent internally, what will be delivered when, to manage expectations. What we also do is we established a weekly steering committee session so that we keep track of the progress. We make sure that all of the relevant stakeholders are tied in and are aware of what's happening. And and then we need to make sure that we receive the relevant input from the data team, for example, where we need the KPIs for the driver-based planning models that we have in place, so that we can update them accordingly. We collect all of the input from the HR database so that we can do the personnel planning, and then we also extract all of the data or the financial data from SAP, especially for the indirect costs. And this way we can then put all of the information together, align with the different teams on the commercial side for revenues, with the product team regarding the direct costs, and can align all of the personnel and indirect costs budgets with the different departments within the organization, and also create the transparency to the management.
Great. Thanks for that. So you all mentioned the whole data set and data flow we've been given. So we are kind of covered with data. The idea is how we deal with that and to which level of detail we are going. So Chloe, maybe on your side, you can further elaborate on how actually granular you are getting in your budget and forecasting approach. Is this on a top-down or bottom-up approach? Are you actually doing both of them? And what are the maybe key item you would like to emphasize in the approach you are having around the budget topic?
Yes, so in general, it's a mix of a top-down and a bottom-up approach. You always need to be top-down first, especially when you are in a hyper-scale growth phase, and you don't necessarily have time to go into very granular details. And it's also a mix of a short and a long-term approach as well. When I say top-down, it means that we first sit down with the founders or the CEO to understand what's their high-level North Star and make sure it's clear to them and to us as well. the key KPI for SaaS business like us are ARR and MRR, sorry, mainly. And that drives most of the business plan assumptions. So we need to make sure we are aligned on the North Star on this one. And we also sit down with the commercial team to make sure that we share the same level of ambition. We also discuss with the founders, how to level up the goals in general to make sure we are ambitious enough. We want to address with them what could go wrong and what could disrupt us as well. And we need also to make sure we understand what needs to be done from a recruitment or from a product roadmap standpoint to meet these targets. And the idea with the top-down approach is to create together with the founders a narrative, a short-term one, a long-term one. And we really write down the equity story and we share it with the broader leadership team and then to the rest of the company during all hand sessions. And very important in this top-down approach, as I mentioned, and especially for product-led company like Pigment, is to sync up with the product team and make sure that you understand what needs to be done from a product roadmap standpoint. Because if you don't deliver on your features, you might not deliver, on your business plan at the end. And last but not least, from the top-down approach, we engage all the stakeholders early on and make sure they buy in the plan, and the short-term one and the long-term one. And we make sure the communication is crystal clear across the company. And I'll be more brief on the bottom-up approach because it's a never-ending process. You can get into a very granular level of detail, which is not necessarily needed, when you do a reforecasting exercise, let's say every quarter, but is a great exercise when you do the annual budget. And the way we do is that we work through multiple iterations with the stakeholders involved in the budgeting process. We collect their inputs directly on Pigment, and that feeds into our business plan, and we can then, run some scenarios and multiple versions of our business plan, and then, stress test these scenarios with the management team. So that's basically how it works, and it's a combination, as I mentioned, of both a top-down and bottom-up approach.
Okay, so we're not the only one doing that as well at Spendesk. And Rienzo, on your side, is this basically the same approach, or would you have a different view on how to deal with budget?
It's always a bit of a challenge overall to manage the bottom-up planning and match it against top-down expectations from the management. And here we always try to how we usually tackle it. We build driver-based business models, so the bottom-up plan. We look at the different KPIs per partners, and in line with that, we have the individual cost components as direct cost elements that come with any KYC that we're doing, any new account opening, and also including a transfer pricing mechanism to run the accounts. And then we also look at overall personnel costs by looking at the headcount per function and department, and then we try to kind of pull together the bottom-up part by aligning with the different department owners and also the management who's responsible for those areas. And the same approach we're kind of running on the indirect cost, and that all together kind of builds our bottom-up planning model, and then we obviously need to align with what the management expects, and that becomes an iterative process and can be also quite challenging and lengthy at times.
Great, thanks a lot, Rienzo. So looking at the time, we still have a couple of minutes before starting to address the question. So currently we are facing a lot of difficulties, if I may say, with the current market condition, with uncertainty. Are you doing some stuff differently versus what you used to do? And what exactly? And it would be great if you can elaborate on that. Maybe Paul, you can start, and Chloe, you'll be next for that one as well.
Sure. So I'll try to be quick. Well, as you said, a lot of uncertainty in the macro environment, inflation, recession, etc. So the goal is to be, as conservative as possible to manage risk, and to preserve the runway, right? There are different ways to approach it. Typically, in the forecasting exercise, you want to include some buffers, right, for the unknown. And the buffers could be different sizes. And also, whenever you think about how to model something, the goal is to, have the most conservative approach. If you take the FX, for example, depending on your maturity of the company, are you, profitable or not? Then the answer on which FX to set for next year, can be answered through, well, I'm profitable, so I need to be careful. If FX goes down, it will impact my top line and EBITDA. So maybe, I should shoot the FX accordingly. Whether on the opposite side, if you're cash burning, you're like, well, if the euro goes down even lower, well, it's fine because I will burn less cash, etc. So again, I think the idea is to be as conservative as possible.
Chloe, you want to add some item? You're muted.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Paul just said. It's all about risk management today for us, which was not necessarily the case before. And the ultimate goal now of a FP&A team is to reduce this future uncertainty and the associated risk. And it has started, I think, with COVID, that has made the path unclear when it comes to choosing, the right assumptions. It made the past assumptions obsolete for, inflation, FX rates, interest rates, ESG pressure as well, geopolitical risks. So we have to deal with a lot of new risk, I would say. And the main challenge for a FP&A team, and this is something that I faced when I was working at Conto, was doing most of it in Excel, which is really static and non-collaborative. So when you need to fall back and adapt very shortly to the new market conditions and, change your assumptions, it can be really burdensome to do that manually. And I know that it has made our life easier to use Pigment for this because we're able, to run multiple scenarios, change assumptions and adapt them very quickly as they are all interconnected. So if we have to, change one assumption in the base case, it can cascade directly into the, the worst case and the high case. And this is definitely an approach, like the scenario approach is way more useful, and I would say even compulsory, to manage this risk today.
Yeah, so thank you. So from what you're saying, basically, we need to be adaptive, flexible, and some of the tools we are using can help on that, to assess the scenario and have changes made easily. So super clear, thanks a lot. So last question before going into the Q&A session. Rienzo, are there any specific item you think it's important to be considered in terms maybe of seasonality, of different business model? Do you want to emphasize something here?
Yeah, happy to. So I think the complexity of the business model is something worthwhile to consider first when setting up and also when running FP&A. So how complex is the organization? How many products do you offer? What are the key revenue drivers and also the cost drivers? Which ones of those do you need to really steer the business? And I think it's also important, ideally as early as possible, to start collecting these relevant data points, and that you can have a reliable database to then set up more reliable forecasting. Of course, you will never be able to circumvent these kind of big shocks in the market that we currently see, but at least you will start understanding seasonality in the business and how you need to reflect that in your budget. And that was also a learning experience at Solaris as we saw the business grow, realizing certain times of the year when there's a drop or an increase in demand or requests for certain products. And all of these things are important to kind of set up the business model. So at the same time, or the FP&A function itself. So also worthwhile to consider what kind of do you run a B2C business? Do you run a B2B? Or in this case of Solaris, it's B2B to X. So we also depend on our partners to ultimately acquire the end customers. And understanding those dependencies is one of the key things to consider in the overall planning process, in the controlling process on the monthly basis, to really understand what's driving the business, or where are we falling short. And one important advice, as I'm also doing some consulting task on the side in my free time, pretty much with different startups and also more established companies, it's about thinking about standardization and automation from very early on, because this sets the stage how scalable your business is, how well you're able to understand growth factors, and choices of customization and customer-specific adjustments should really be taken consciously, and understanding those implications as well.
Thanks a lot, Rienzo. Super clear as well. So I think we can now deep dive into the question. So we have quite a lot. So thanks everybody for asking. So we'll try to cover them all. Not sure we can. And Chloe, Paul, and Rienzo, really happy to jump on any one you would like to take. So maybe we can cover this first one. So any tips to be more accurate around forecasting MRR, especially for an hyper-growth business? Being precise in a fast-growing business is harder than a mature one. So I don't know if one of you guys want to take that one.
Happy to jump in here. So I think really understanding the MRR, as I just mentioned now, is really key. What's driving those revenues? What are the key dependencies? And then understanding, especially in the hypergrowth space, what does the pipeline look like? What are conversion rates? And I think considering all of these elements will help you to make more accurate forecasting, and then also help you to track your actual performance against what you set out as a budget. And I think obviously multi-year planning is challenging, especially in a hypergrowth stage, also given dependency on the market environment. But really getting down to a very granular level and understanding the performance of those key KPIs and why you might be overperforming or falling short of that is key, so that you also can create that transparency internally towards the management and other parts of the organization.
Thanks a lot, Chloe. And Paul, do you want to add anything about and around forecasting MRR? Or
Yeah, if I may, I completely agree with Rienzo. I think it depends on who are the customer you want to address as well. I think it's very enterprise customers with a long sales cycle. Obviously, looking at your pipeline will give you a good idea. If you address more the prosumers or SMB markets, it's going to be a little bit different, but then there are maybe other indicators that you can look at. But also, I think what I very agree with you, Rienzo, is it's super hard to forecast MR in any case. So the key is to understand and analyze super deeply what happened in the past, what's going on right now, to over time be able to get more accurate in the future, because it will depend on your business, right? There's no one answer for this.
Yeah, completely agree to see that this is very incremental. You need to look at the past, but also taking into account if there were some specific events and like we had COVID. Okay, what do you do with data that actually misleads the previous analysis you may have? So yeah, really a tricky question, but thanks for the tips. Another question we are all reporting to our investors. Are there any key ratio that your board are really and strongly interested in?
I can take that one. I think our VC investors today love what we call unit economics. They love your ARPU, so the average spend per customer. They love your gross margin. So make sure you understand your gross margin by country, by segment. The more precise you are on that one, the more they will collaborate with you as well. They love the customer lifetime value. It's a key one. And maybe there will be other questions on that afterwards. they love to understand also your cost of acquisition, the CAC, and these, especially like in the SaaS sector, are key to reporting. And I would end up with probably HR as well, you know, so like staff retention and churn is very important. And one that I forgot, sorry, is a net dollar retention as well. So how can you upsell your customers and retain them over time? And those, of course, will ultimately impact your customer lifetime value. So if you are in control of these KPIs and you report them regularly and properly, you'll go through, you'll go easily through your board presentations and fundraisings.
Thanks, Chloe. Yeah, I think we agree on all the KPI you just mentioned. Are there any? So you have the board on a maybe quarterly basis, but are you providing your board with the unique economics you just mentioned on an additional time frames on a monthly basis? How fun are they on data, and what are the exact requests they have about reporting? If anyone can take it,
I'm happy to do that. So I think it all kind of is a it depends answer. Yeah. So one, how good is your database? What kind of insightful values can you actually provide? Are you able to reflect accurate unit economics by providing it on a monthly basis, or would it actually make sense to report those on a quarterly basis because maybe you have certain timing effects and you're able to give a bit of better insight on the actual performance of the business? Obviously, you're trying to really become as granular as possible over time, but especially when you're a startup, it becomes essential that you're conscious of those factors early on, and the better you are at reporting those, ideally already on a monthly basis, the better. And at some point, it helps to also track certain KPIs and ratios also during the month, so that you understand your current month's performance and also are able to react to certain shocks. I think given especially the current situation, that's always very helpful. And the better you are at automating the forecasting part, depending on your performance, the better it is also to provide more forward-looking ratios and perspectives to the investor base.
Great, thanks Rienzo. So going back to the budget process and overall forecasting, we have a question about the frequency. So how frequently do you update the budget in your company?
Yeah, maybe I can take this one. Yeah. So budget, at least for now, we're doing it only once a year. Then we don't change it. But then we have the forecasts that typically in the past we would do only maybe twice a year. Now it's going more and more frequent. And I think we're doing them every quarter at the moment, and we may do it even more. I know some companies, they do it kind of every month, rolling forecasts. We're not there yet, but in an environment with a lot of uncertainty, I think, of course, you need to do your forecast more regularly.
Yeah, maybe I can build on that. So for us, I usually would do a full budget planning cycle once a year. However, given certain market changes, that we would update those budgets. So that's also the reason why, I mean, we require supervisory board approval and also submit our plans to BaFin as part of the process. So there we can't just run a normal forecast, but we actually need to have an official budget or adjusted budget that needs to be submitted. So here it also pretty much depends. If you're in line with budget and there's not really a need to adjust it, then you can just run with it. But obviously, if you see certain developments during the course of the year, then you need to keep some flexibility.
Okay, great. So we still have a couple more. So we have a lot of questions regarding tools. So actually 3 questions. So one of them would be, what is the overall budget for tools in your department? So I would assume in FP&A maybe, and which are the key ones you could not do without? So that would be the first question around tool. And then the other one would be, for a startup company of less than 50 people, when is the best time to automate and to migrate to tools?
So maybe I can start with the second one, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very good question, but there's no clear answer because it will depend on the challenges that you're going through at the moment and depends on your company and the maturity of the organization, right? So, for example, Aircall, a couple of years ago, we struggled a lot on the order to cash because we have a lot of volume, a lot of customers. It's very complicated pricing, etc. In a lot of countries, it's also regulated. We have issues on taxes. So we invested a lot on this, right? But for a lot of other companies, this is not an issue. So maybe they will invest somewhere else. And if you think, you're struggling to model your top line or whatever, or you have issues on the data consistency, etc., you need a tool to make sure everything is properly structured and saved, etc., then maybe you need to invest in a planning tool. So again, I would look at what are the biggest challenges you have today and start working on those.
I don't know if Chloe and Rienzo, you want to add something here. There was a question around budget. I'm not sure you want to cover that one and be very specific on the budget you're spending. But if you had to choose one tool among the ones you're using, so Chloe, I have pretty good idea, but you can go for it. There is also a question about Pigment. So I think it's a nice way. Someone looking at Pigment, can you help me and tell me more how Pigment can help automate the process and eliminate the use of Excel?
Yeah, I'm pretty biased on that one, as we have automated, most of our processes on Pigment. And talking about, dollar budget, I don't think it's relevant here because it really depends on the size of your company. So it would not make sense to talk about that during this session. But it does help taking the very simple use cases. Actual versus forecast production, can be 100% automated on an FP&A tool. You just, upload your general ledger and then you click on a button and it just compares to your latest version of the budget. You can do your cash forecasting, you can do your workforce planning, you can do your sales capacity planning, you can do your sales compensations. You can pretty anything you do on Excel, you can do it on a forecasting tool like Pigment, which is why at the end of the day, it's more you have two routes. Either you recruit a team of FP&A analysts or you automate most of the processes and you'll save some headcounts, which is our approach. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Chloe. I'm going to add up a question to that one for you. So you were saying that you are using Pigment, obviously, but also AgiCap, which is also kind of a cash forecasting tool. For sure, it's an aggregator of your banks, but also, so how come are you using those two? And do you consider getting rid of AgiCap at some point, or is it to just use the aggregator part, if I may say?
So we use the aggregator part. So we are an international business. We operate a lot outside of France. So we do have a lot of FX management to do, which is not easy to manage on Excel or even on an FP&A tool. But the cash forecasting is done on Pigment. It's not done on AgiCap. So it's really the aggregator part that we like. It's connected to your banks. It can help you, optimize your FX. Which is what you need at start, when it's all about managing your runway and your cash burn. But the planning part is on Pigment.
Okay, thanks, Chloe. So let's take maybe one last question. So an easy one. So how do you display your P&L? Is it by nature of costs? Is it by department? Is it both? So going back to the roots of FP&A, I don't know if one of you guys want to take it.
I can cover that. So the general P&L, how we provide it is on a group level, just really high level, providing the run through of the main revenue items, so our net interest income as well as our net fee and commission income, all of those elements, and also we separate out what is non-recurring from the business, and then going into the operating expenses, compensation, non-compensation expenses. This we kind of provide on a general basis. Then we show the details for the Solarisbank AG and the one for Contis, which is the company that we acquired at the end of last year. And then also we provide P&Ls per country. And also on a quarterly basis, we dive deeper into various elements, certain ratios, KPI performance that we also show on a monthly basis. How many accounts have been opened? What's the total number of accounts? The loan volume, how this evolved, and then provide more granularity also in terms of qualitative statements regarding the development.
Okay, so thanks a lot. I think we can stop here. So thanks a lot to you three for taking part of this session. I think we better understood how your structure organized and how you can try at best to predict the future. This is definitely something that is asked to finance team, even though quite complicated sometimes. So thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for all the attending as well. So hopefully we managed to cover most of your questions. And anyway, the CFO Connect Summit is continuing, so hopefully you will continue to attend the session. And yeah, thanks for your participation.
Thanks for having us.
Indeed, thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.